We're live.
Okay, it's Wednesday, October 18th, 2023 for a Curriculum and Learning Committee meeting at the School District of Menominee Falls Board of Education. There's a possibility that a quorum of the full membership of the Board of Education may be in attendance at board committee meetings, including virtual meetings. There will be no full board action taken at any board committee meeting. Only members of the committee may vote on any item on the agenda. A live broadcast will be streamed on the school district YouTube page. To watch the recorded meeting, please visit the SDMF YouTube site. And we are at school district office in conference room 3344 and 3345. It is, let's see, well, the meeting is called to order at 6:01. Was the meeting properly posted?
Yes.
Okay, and minutes. I need a motion, or do we have a minute approval? You know what, I forgot to look at them. I should probably look at them. I don't see them in my minute.
They should be there for you.
Yeah, I know, they're fine. Oh, they look fine.
I'll motion.
Okay,
I'll second.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Alrighty, first discussion item. Am I like way ahead of myself?
No,
Okay.
you're.
I feel like
it's
this
just
is
going fast,
awkward.
but
Yeah, I know.
we're good. And we have just two discussion items tonight, and the first one will be really brief, but I promise that we are going to make up for all of that in November, just looking at the
Yeah, I see
calendar.
that.
So, I think it's just the timing of how things work, but, as our first discussion item, I wanted to bring the world language standards to your attention. So in working with our various curriculum chairs, one of the things we're doing is evaluating where we're up to date on standards and where there might be new state standards that we have not considered adopting yet. And world languages was one of those areas, and it came up early, even before school started this year, because we had a new German teacher at the high school and we were evaluating materials. And we have very much a lot of kind of homegrown curriculum in our language areas. And he had some materials he was used to using, and so we were considering bringing forward to you a new textbook request, which we are not doing currently, but we will evaluate that for next year. But through that conversation, I said, what standards would we be addressing? It would be important to know in this new textbook. And we said, we started looking at the standards and realized there were new standards that had not been brought forward. And so you can see
I have an
here.
odd question.
Yeah.
Maybe start with it. So the standards before, were they through Wisconsin standards?
They were not
Oh, okay.
actually, so, and I was just gonna pull that up, so
Oh,
you
gotcha,
segued
sorry.
perfectly.
Oh, perfect. I must have,
Yeah, let me
it's subliminal.
do that, there we go. So if we look at where our standards are posted on the Curriculum Learning and Analytics page, and of course
Okay.
now it's gonna be slow, but we'll give it a second. All of our standards are posted by category, and in parentheses, the year in which they were adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And so our world language standards are the last one down at the bottom, and they were last adopted in 2015. And they aren't state standards, they were the can-do statements or the performance indicators from the American Council on Teaching of Foreign Languages. This Wisconsin state standards, as you have an opportunity to read this document, used this work as it informed the state standards that were adopted by the state. But it is, in my opinion, more robust and more complete than just this piece that we are currently using on which to base our world language instruction, if that makes sense. And it's explained in the state standards, I'll show you. So these, this is currently what we're using. And you can see it gives some general or global benchmarks for performance in various categories, and then provides some can-do statements that you might give to students. So, and shows where, like at a low novice level, here's where you might perform, all the way up to more advanced or intermediate and advanced performance. So, for example, down here, sorry, I'm gonna make everybody dizzy with my scrolling, but I can greet my peers or I can introduce myself to someone all the way up to I can have a simple conversation on a number of everyday topics. I can talk about my daily activities, personal preferences, et cetera, and it gets more complex as we go through. So the Wisconsin state standards, again, are informed by this work, but they are newer, so they're from 2019. And don't break it down to the can-do level necessarily, and so it's more teacher documentation that would help understand the depth and breadth of the different standards, I guess, would be the
So how
simplest way.
will it differ in actual teaching and the curriculum for the students?
So when we
Yeah.
talked about it, it was, there weren't a lot of major shifts, but it would bring us up to date with the latest standards. They would do, before adopting any new materials, would do a more in-depth look at, what we already have, what might be missing based on these new standards. But they didn't anticipate that there would be major shifts, but felt like if we were going to look at new materials, considering these more updated standards would make sense to make sure that we do have that depth that we should have with our world language curriculum, knowing this is a 7-12 curriculum, because we do have material or courses at the middle school, and then would also just be probably a more complete match for the newest materials that we would be purchasing. If that makes sense. But they did not see in the day-to-day practice for students wouldn't be or for teachers or teachers in planning purposes would not be a major shift, because they are one is based on the other. So Kimberly Essenauer, our World Languages Chair, wanted to be here tonight. She was not able to join, and we thought in the spirit of getting the conversation started, I would bring these tonight, give you the month to review them, and then she will be here at our November 29th meeting to answer any questions you have, explain it from a content expert standpoint more completely than I can, and well-versed in many things, but I'm not a world language teacher. So this is a niche area where we definitely rely on our content experts, and then, look for potential approval at that meeting. So I did not expect that you had looked at this yet. You had the
I just
whole-
perused.
Yeah,
I perused.
I looked through it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But wanted you to have plenty of time to dig in, and I know these are heady documents.
They are, and actually, there was just one thing that stood out to me.
Okay.
And it's, again, I'm sure just as a comment overall, but looking at, the proficiency bands and then the language learners information from 2012, it's page 14. It's like the bar graph. The next one, there you go. So here, just showing kind of the beginning point for language learning, and noticing obviously that the younger that the kids start, the more advanced range that they hit. Obviously, probably a combination of longer time spent in that language, and then learning younger
Right.
is easier.
Yeah.
The language age, meaning if it's.
Are we, would it be like the end of the world to look at doing something like starting Spanish in kindergarten or 3rd grade, bringing those world languages to our younger students to give them more opportunities to learn to the advanced level before they graduate high school? Obviously, or a question for,
Right, that would certainly be
worth
a
a discussion, yeah.
discussion for the board. Obviously, that would be a shift in
huge
practice.
shift, I understand that,
But yes, there is research to support,
Mhm.
and having worked in a school where we had elementary Spanish, a long time ago, and then unfortunately it didn't last because of the budget
Yeah.
requirements and the teaching staff to make that happen. But I have seen firsthand that benefit,
Sure.
and there's research to support that as well. I have not, if that was something we wanted to pursue as a discussion, we'd want to pull the latest research and, kind of obviously have lots of discussion about that, but that's
Mhm.
certainly
Yeah, I mean, I
Would
would like
be-
to see, I would like to pull the research and have more discussion on that. I really think that it benefits our students, not just academically, but then to be able to graduate bilingual, it just opens up a different world for them.
Yeah, so there are a couple different ways.
Well, yeah, I guess.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, no, go ahead. I was gonna say there are a couple of different ways that language programs are structured. You know, if you're talking a fully bilingual program, that's
different.
different
different
than
than
offering like
just offering
offering
Spanish
it,
or,
right.
you know, an immersion program and or else
Well, yeah.
firsthand experience in that. You know, there are very different kinds of instructional delivery models
Correct,
there,
and different
so you're
costs
looking at,
associated.
correct, so you're
Mhm.
looking at, I think a good deal of study and research that would need to be done to do that well. I'm not saying that we can't do that, but
Right.
it's-
Right.
there's some big questions that we'd probably wanna answer, so.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you're not talking about immersion. That's right.
No,
So
I
actually
think,
introducing
and
it.
again, looking at
Just
the
starting the
cost,
conversation.
just starting the conversation and looking at the cost of what it would, what it would look like to do it where, you know, maybe it is an offering. And if we don't have enough students at one semester, maybe it's offered every other semester or, you know, to that level that we can not, you know, chase the world language teachers away either. But, you know, exploring that further, I would be interested in seeing more.
Well, I really think that there's lots of value in introducing it. I mean, I live it. I raise my children that way. I speak to them ever since they were younger. I actually grew up that way too, where, you know, both languages were spoken synonymously in the same household. So now as an adult, I can pivot back and forth without even realizing I switch back and forth. And that's actually an amazing part of a child's brain and development. I mean, the same research can also be found for kids who actually are introduced to music early on. The same pathways, et cetera, and so I think it's worth us entertaining. I think it's important to introduce it younger because they are sponges. They will learn it much quicker, and once you actually embed that at a younger age, it becomes much more fluid as they get older. Because let's just say different languages, the intonation influx, their tongue, their movement is much different when you've actually solidified it in one language. Like for example, English is very monotone. When you speak in other languages, there's influxes, you know, intonations. That's really hard to actually learn once you're older versus when you're younger. It's amazing. So yeah.
And I've seen studies too where it shows if you learn one foreign language younger, it's easier for you to learn others as you're getting older, and it's probably that same concept. And so we could even just look at introducing one language, for example, to where then the children are given an opportunity to build on that. And once then they get to middle school and start honing that in a little bit,
Then you offer more.
Because
well, they'll be at the advanced,
they started in 6th grade for
Seventh grade.
Seventh grade.
Yeah, there's an introductory course, but then you get to language specific in 7th grade.
Because usually it is more, I mean, I'd like to hear what the experts say. It's been a while since I've had that research in school and stuff, but you know, they say learning it earlier, you know, before that critical language age, you tend to pick it up easier. I mean, it just makes sense, right?
And I mean,
But
with globalization too, I mean, business, people are looking for bilingual people, interpreters. I mean, globalization is huge, right,
For sure.
for business.
Yeah,
If we can get people to like almost to an advanced range by the time they graduate high school, I mean, we're setting them up for success right there.
I agree.
In the business world at least. And that involves, you know, all the STEM stuff too, science, technology, engineering. That's all huge factors of globalization.
I mean, that, I think
agree.
it's definitely something to consider, because it can be something, like it may be, you know, I mean, it would be a process down the road, and you'd have to like vision it forward.
Correct, and
But,
I'm
Yes.
almost
like, it could be like
wondering-
an innovative type of draw for Menominee Falls, you know?
For sure. I'm almost wondering if this would be, like to Mr. Munoz, and
Yeah.
again, this is not necessarily, I guess, my work directly, but wondering if this would be as we do a strategic planning
Yeah.
process, kind of,
Kind of dive into it a little bit.
you know, put that as and have a plan, because it's not something that we could study in a semester and then
Right.
launch. It would be a couple of years
Right.
worth of work probably to get to that place.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, long-term project, but certainly that, this is the time to start thinking about those things.
Yeah, that's true.
And getting community input to interest in
Absolutely.
those kinds of
Get
things, so.
the interest level and
Invaluable, I believe.
well, I think if you take a pulse on the community, they would agree, but I might be like, cause I'm seeing this and like, this is kind of, you know, a no-brainer, but not everyone has seen the research either, so we can, you know, yeah, see what happens,
I think it's valuable.
absolutely.
Any other discussion or thoughts? Okay, so we'll review it and bring our questions for next time.
Yes, and if
Okay.
you have any that you wanna send ahead of time,
Okay,
so
sure.
that I can, and give it to the team, so they can kind of be looking at, that's probably a really efficient use of our time. If you have the opportunity to do that, and then she will be here on the 29th, and we'll, definitely get your questions answered and look for, possible approval.
Okay, great. And then the next, moving on,
Yes.
22 to 23 title report.
Title report,
Alright.
yes. So this is an annual report that we provide to you. Laura is here and does a ton of work with our title program. Obviously, I provide the district leadership and oversight and approval, but I came in mid-year to this
Okay.
work too. So this is an annual report, so Laura took the lead on this and does a wonderful job, so I'm gonna let her continue to take the lead with this report, and I'm sure I will jump in as we go, and over time, I expect that I will take this over with her support. She graciously agreed to continue to take the lead as I continue to learn some of these, these
Okay.
pieces, so.
Alright, so
I'm ready.
our title program report, feel free to interrupt at any time with any questions.
Okay.
So the purpose of this report is just to introduce to you the title grant program or remind you of it if you've sat through the report before. We go through grant obligations with our private schools, and then we go through the 4 titles that we participate in, Title 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'll give you brief summaries of those as we go. So our title grant program is part of the federal Every Student Succeeds Act. And that act allocates federal grant funding to the districts to improve student achievement. It is governed by the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction and does have significant amounts of rules and guidelines around it. And they vary by program. These are just kind of generic summaries for you. Title I funds are dependent on our economically disadvantaged student population. It's computed with a formula that DPI gives us through a program that I use with them. And then that funding they spit out a number for us. It tells us what schools are eligible to receive that funding. And then we use that funding to help support academically eligible students. I know that seems like a long description, but commonly kind of across the state is the misnomer that Title I funds are just used for disadvantaged students, economically disadvantaged students. So we're really careful with how we phrase that to families because that's not the case. Our economically disadvantaged makes us eligible. The funds are spent to help our academically disadvantaged kids. So it's not only for poor kids.
Or tied to us per student,
Yes.
it's tied to
Yeah, it's tied to the academic need. Yeah, so we're always really careful in communicating with our families so that they don't feel like they're being separate or pulled apart or anything like that. Title II funds are dependent on our general district enrollment. It is not tied to economically disadvantaged. And they're used typically for staff professional development, which we link to our strategic planning typically. So a lot of literacy, math, a lot of the core subjects. Sometimes the technology areas too, depending on what the district is focusing on and what budget capabilities are. Because we have to be careful of the state rules, state and federal rules. Title III funds are designated to provide staff support, services, and education to support our English language learners. And that allocation for the 2022-2023 school year was managed by Pupil Services. And then for 23-24 has shifted over to curriculum learning and analytics. So we are learning more about that program as we go and take it over.
Why did it shift?
So, when my predecessor came on board with a focus and an interest in English language learners, the supervision of that staff moved from pupil services to curriculum learning analytics, and then it has stayed with us. So that made sense then that those title funds came over.
Yeah.
But that mid-year shift was messy, so it stayed separate from the full year, and now it's with us.
And then Title IV is a complex formula that's determined by Title I and also comes to us through that DPI program that I use. And it's a highly flexible grant that allows us to ensure all students have access to great education, basically. So we have the ability to be flexible with it each year, still following all the guidelines. Along with the title grant funds federally comes our obligation to private schools. So both public and private schools have access to these funds, and our private schools can choose if they want to participate in these programs or not. The responsibility lies on us as the public school district to manage the funds and do budgeting and purchasing and working with the private schools to make sure they're following everything within the letter of the law. And we do that by working closely with our private schools and doing consultations with them. We do grant budget stuff, third-party services for intervention services and things like that. And we do have 4 schools that are kind of our repeating schools that use it every year. So Grace, St. Mary, Bethlehem, and Chesterton.
And I would say is one of the learnings for me coming in new was just how much interaction there is with private schools around this work and how much Laura does, and we really don't talk about that because it's just for their schools. So I think it's just good for all of us to know that that's a piece of work happening behind the scenes and
Sure.
in the division.
Yeah, that's true. We do meet with each school about 4 times a year minimum. And then we do additional work with them through email communication, phone calls, purchasing, budgeting, things like that.
Okay. And is this is federal or state DPI?
So the dollars are federal dollars that go from the federal government to DPI, and then DPI, the state DPI, distributes it to the
Okay.
districts.
And so our communication about what we're purchasing and approvals and everything goes to DPI,
Sure.
to the federal government.
Okay. And that would make sense then that the private schools are offered that same
Right.
opportunity under those, okay, obligations from the state.
So we oversee the private schools. How do we decide on how much they get allocated?
We don't decide that. DPI decides that through that program I use.
Okay.
Yep, so I put in information about enrollment, they
Got it.
communicate stuff
And
to
then
me.
DPI establishes
Yes.
the allotment. Okay.
Okay, just so I understand it, so then they determine how they use those funds related to that title in their school?
In partnership with us.
Okay.
So the LEA, we are the local education authority over those
Sure.
funds of the public district. So the expectation lies on us that we know the rules and can help the private school spend those funds in a way that meets all the requirements, and that we are doing the purchasing. The private school itself cannot do the purchasing, because the federal guidelines don't allow them to make the purchase. So when they want to spend the money, either I can purchase it on their behalf, which is probably 90% of what we do, or they can have an employee personally purchase it and we can reimburse that specific employee. We can't reimburse the private school at any time. That's not allowed per state and federal guidelines.
So for example, like, school, Grace Lutheran? Grace
Yep.
Lutheran has Title I, like how would that be utilized there?
Yep, so Title I is typically for intervention service for the academically needy kids. So Grace puts together, once we've determined the allocation, I won't go through that because it's a longer process.
Yeah.
But once we know they have an allocation, they give me a list of students that are academically eligible for assistance.
Okay.
And then we work with a third-party vendor called Catapult. So we contract with Catapult on our side after communicating with Grace to decide how much of their allocation they want to spend on this. Catapult comes in and does the intervention services kind of on our behalf because we don't have any literacy teachers within our district that have spare time in their schedules to be able to go off-site to do services.
Okay.
So Grace has agreed that Catapult can do the services in their school. And then Catapult invoices us, we pay the bill, and we process stuff.
Is therapy in any of these titles, or is that something else?
So not typically.
Yeah.
The unique part about private schools is that depending on if they generate an allocation, they have the ability to determine where the need is. So if their students have an allocation, like SDMF has an allocation, and we can service Valley View residents that attend their school, and their Valley View residents are, phenomenal at reading and math, but are having huge behavior problems.
Okay.
They could do some type of behavior intervention services or behavior training for the teacher that's working with those kids with the Title I funds. Not really direct therapy with students, because then we're getting into a lot more parent sign-off stuff.
And I was thinking about speech therapy.
Oh, speech falls
Under
That's
pupil
me.
services.
Yeah.
under
So-
special
Right,
education.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine.
so these are
Okay.
not, these can be
That's
used.
interesting though about the behavioral, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
These dollars can be used on kids that qualify for special education, but you don't have to be special ed to qualify for the services.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Cool.
So speech, specifically speech falls under special education.
Yeah. Interesting.
So for Title I,
Mm-hmm.
we are a targeted Title I district, and that means that our program identifies specific schools that are eligible for title funds, and that can change each year. So in the 22-23 school year, Shady Lane qualified based on the economic status of students, and North Middle School. North is pretty consistent for us. The elementary shifts, and you can see up on in the presentation, the allocation amount. Our allocation isn't huge, so it doesn't typically cover a full teacher at the school. So it's a partial salary for a teacher that is commonly doing, they might be doing full-time intervention, like their full-time position, but only part of it is title and the other part is paid by the district.
Right.
And we use it for reading intervention at both the elementary level and the middle school.
So only these two schools got allocated X amount of dollars?
They
This
only them,
year.
they
Qualified.
qualify.
Well, I
Yes.
have actually last year's too, at Shady Lane North Middle School also, were the only two.
Yep, so it's not uncommon for us to only have a couple of schools that qualify. And when they qualify, we have to have what CBI considers a viable service program. So Shady Lane and North Middle School qualified where we could put enough of the allocation to be able to have what CPI considered feasible intervention for the school year where they actually see students making progress.
So it's the academically challenged students.
Yes.
So when we have this and we allocate, do we also have like, we're giving this X amount of dollars to these schools, but do we have any data that reflect upon investing in these two schools, how it has improved their reading skills? Or do we just give them money to see?
So it's not, sorry, I just wanna think of how to word it. We're not necessarily giving them money. So in Title I, they have the rule where when you budget out to schools, they all have to be equal before federal dollars are applied. So we use Title I to help with intervention services where we knew we were going to do those intervention services to begin with. When we budget out in your regular budget meetings, we use our funds so that we're not adding and removing staff every year because it changes. So those students that are Title I are in with our regular intervention kids. We don't separate them as Title I students versus our regular intervention students. Does that make sense?
So the same concept of like, it's not following the student, it's following the need.
Right, so the data wouldn't separate out students who've received this support provided by title versus other supports, does that make sense?
Yeah, so the teacher doing the title intervention, because they could be doing non-title funded intervention if 50% is title money and 50% is district money. We don't typically separate out and say, like only these kids are title and they're receiving this intervention versus non-title kids are receiving this intervention.
So we do track
Intervention.
we do have data to track how our intervention is performing, and how we're growing students. And then obviously we track overall performance of our students on an ongoing basis.
Did that? Did I?
It's
Okay.
tricky.
Since you brought it up, I'd like to see those numbers in regards to the intervention. How that actually helps the students, because again, I'm about, what you put in, if it's showing the results, if not, we change course.
Mhm.
So I just wanna just out of curiosity to see, the monies that we're putting into the intervention, if that is, positive impact on the students.
So I wonder if that would be like a future presentation topic, because I think that if the numbers alone would be there, because kids, they change and they track when interventions change and, who's in, who's out, it might be worth a larger conversation. That,
Out of curiosity, I just wanna make sure that this year they'll be right.
Mm-hmm,
I'm not sure the effort you put in,
exactly,
it's cost.
yeah, or we don't get paid. And the patient needs a benefit too, by the way.
no, I'd say we've got some stories to tell there for sure.
Yeah.
So I'll.
Sorry about that.
Interesting,
No, that's
yeah, I
okay.
know, that would be interesting.
Oh, sorry, I need to.
I didn't know these titles would have been so fascinating.
I just make them fascinating.
You do make them fascinating.
For Title II, the grant funds are allocated to the district, so these are not school specific. We use them for staff development that matches our strategic planning. Like I said, typically math, reading, sometimes technology, depending on what the district is focusing on. We budget that as expenditure requests come through, as staff have said they're interested in attending a conference, or as Amy has directed, our strategic planning says we should attend this conference, and then DPI has to approve those expenditures also. So up there you can see what our allocations have been over the past couple of years, what we've carried over year, and then the total that's been available to us. We have focused on decreasing our carryover year over year. Carryover has a limited amount of spending time, and the better we do at expending our grant funds, the more flexibility we have with our district funds to be able to expend those on things that we couldn't use grant funds for. So we worked pretty hard to try to do a better job at that.
Is there a reason why we're not using all of our funds?
We have to be careful of DPI supplement versus supplant rule. Before I came to the district, as best I understand, we carried over some bigger amounts because we funded a lot internally. So we have to be careful with DPI that we're not moving things out of our district budget into the grant budget. So if we paid for it with district funds before, then you would have to be able to prove to DPI why we can't do that anymore. So like budget cuts can fit into that, like where I can say, look, our budget was cut, so we don't have the funds to pay for it anymore. But aside from that, DPI is pretty strict about, like you can't just say, oh, this looks like it'd be easier to pay for with a grant, so we can open it up to, to renovate something or
Yeah,
renovate.
sure, okay.
And we got closer last year with carryover. In fact,
Yep.
that there was an academy that we were thinking of sending some people to, and if that had been available to us, it hadn't like sold out kind of thing, we probably would have used
Yeah.
most of it.
And what's the limitation on carryover, one year?
Oh,
Yeah, so every year we've spent down our carryover to avoid losing anything back to the state in our Title II funds.
So just one question, I was comparing between obviously, because I have last year's and this year's. The carryover amounts, there's a big difference in regards to 22, 23 versus 23, 24. It went from 28 and then,
we spent quite a bit last year, so there was less left in the budget to carry over this year. The early literacy academy that we did was,
That's what I wanted to see what was.
there were some big ticket PD items that were,
The science of reading.
Sure.
that some of those things that you've heard about, we used some of that Title II to pay for, and they're
Those were like trainings, right? Like
Yeah, so
continuous,
that
like develop.
Early Literacy Academy, for example, was, and it's a 2-year program, so we paid half of it last year, half of it this year. It's I think we had 6, don't quote me on that. We had a number of full day sessions that we were with the trainer, and then
Right.
days when they came here, and then online coaching in between. So it was a pretty robust program, so
Yeah.
yeah, so there were quite a few things. So we'll continue to work to spend as much of that as we can.
Sure.
Sure, you can go to that, sure. Yeah, I'm gonna be mindful of making good choices.
Alright, so for our Title III, so if you're looking at last year's report to this year's report, you're gonna see a change in numbers. And that is partially because I pulled all the numbers, and in the past I had just reached out to People Services and they had given me whatever numbers. So I dug really deep this year for the numbers. So Title III is very specific to the English learners. And DPI has gotten increasingly strict on what that means for expenditures, how you can use it, and requires significantly more specific budgeting pieces now that they're reviewing very carefully before they'll approve stuff. And that has happened, from what I understand from talking to People Services, in the past 2 years now. This year and last year, because there was a shift at DPI as far as who was managing it. So for 22-23, there was a significant amount available to spend, but they didn't expend all of that money. So their total expenditure was around, I'm gonna say 4,000 and change, which is why you see the carryover amount listed as the 11,913. Carryover is always from the year before, so the full allocation from 22-23 carried over this year. That means we have that 11,913, we have all of 23-24 to spend it. However, the 9,662 was from the 21-22 year. And because we didn't expend it in the 22-23 year, that put it into tidings. There's a little explanation underneath. Tidings is a special word for you need to spend this ASAP or you lose it.
Yep.
So we try to never get anything into tidings, and when we can avoid it.
Yeah.
So we realized there was money in tidings in September when things shifted over to CLA. And tidings has to be expended by September 30th. So we worked rapidly with our EL teachers to put together some purchasing stuff and to do some significant budget work with WISE grants and DPI to be able to get those items budgeted, ordered, and then we're processing as they come in to make sure they can liquefy by the tidings report due date, which is in November. So that 9,662 is the tidings amount. It's not included in the total available, that 25,598, because it's not available to us the whole year. So that 25,598, we have the entire 23-24 year to spend.
Gotcha.
The 9,662, we can no longer try to spend it down because we're after that September 30th deadline.
So we'll see where we end up, but we worked hard to make wise purchases, but yet spend as much of that as we could in the time that we had.
Pardon my
So-
ignorance, is EL English as a second language
Yes,
basically?
thank you,
Okay.
English learners. So yeah, students who are in various levels of, new to the country or, new to the language. Yeah, it was ESL for a while and then it was ELL,
Okay.
Yeah,
I've known it as
English-
ESL.
Yeah, English is the second language and then ELL, English language learners, and now it's just EL, English
Okay.
learners, so. Yeah, so I gotta keep up with the acronyms.
I know, right?
It's hard, it's
Especially if
hard.
they change all the time.
Yeah.
Exactly, so we don't make it easy. So we'll continue to work with, I think I put in the Board Connect this past week that I've been working with the EL teachers around some curricular resources for kids new to the country that they were interested in, and so we're kind of in the final processes of getting ready to greenlight that as a supplemental support to them, and we'll continue to look. So I want them to have a variety of materials that they can use to support kids. They do a lot of in-class support, but they also, do some pull-out in their classroom to help kids learn
Do you also, do you have that for like, different languages? Is that something you're saying, break down different?
Yeah, so it's really English-based, but it's hard to explain how it should have that would be another great topic sometime, because the teachers are amazing to talk to. So they do have resources, they do have books in other languages, but most of the time their focus is really helping the kids learn English.
Yeah, so purchases included like English flashcards or games, things that we just purchased. Things to make the students feel more comfortable in the classroom where they could identify with things from their culture. I think the high school has like some like different country flags and stuff that has increased some discussion between the kids where they can point to, what's theirs, even if they're all speaking in different levels of English and all have different home languages.
Right.
Alright, any other questions around Title III?
No.
Alright, and then Title IV again is that more flexible grant allocation. We still have to be careful of the supplement versus the plant rule that I explained. But you can see what our allocation has been over the past couple of years and what our carryover has been. In the, I don't remember if it was 21, 22, I think, is when we started funding the MiFi hotspots. Those are the hotspots that students or families can check out so that anyone without access to the internet always has it available to them. So that's always funded out of this grant, so that we have that available. And there's a whole process around that our social workers and principals and everyone know about.
Now with the grant that the government's given, like Spectrum to give to families, is that program still in place though?
Yes, so this is totally separate from that, because we don't do anything, at least that I know of, with the Spectrum piece and the federal government piece there. Ours is a solely in-district process.
Okay.
So we have a form that our principals can give to families. If a family says, I can no longer afford my internet, or we don't have internet, or we have spotty internet, whatever the case may be, that the families can fill out with the social workers, and to be honest, I don't know that we've ever denied anyone who's filled out a form. Because we have a decent number of hotspots and we've never maxed them out so far. I mean, during COVID we might have, but post we haven't. So we always try to make those very available to our families.
Cool.
And then the other amounts in there have just depended on what our district has been looking at doing. So in the 22-23 school year, we did some VR goggles. That was a purchase that kind of fell into the 21-22 year and the 22-23 year because of supply issues on the vendor side. So the VR goggles are something that kind of North and the high school kind of shares back and forth. There's a set at each. They were bought at different times. And they're looking into how they can better use those and give opportunities to students that maybe don't have the means to travel as much, and they can kind of see like some of the art stuff through there, things like that. So that was an area we were looking at, and was kind of worked on by Jeff Nennig before he retired, and it just ended up straddling those 2 years. And then for the 23-24 school year, we're looking at a literacy piece for that. And we still have the MiFi student hotspots, and then the rest will be determined based on strategic planning that's done by the board and the leadership team.
Somebody said it, but what does the A stand for? Is it academics or I'm just guessing.
They break down like Title 4A, Title 1D.
Oh, like just the
So
level,
it's,
okay.
yeah, it's their own acronym, and to be honest, I don't know if I've ever actually seen it written out.
Don't even, no. I was just kind of curious, I'm like, oh.
I think there should be a
so,
Title 4B and a Title 4, yeah.
Yeah. Any questions or any comments? Joel, you good?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That was very
Yes, thank
thorough. Appreciate it.
Very informative.
Yes. Okay, and then reviewing, discussion referring, the curriculum calendar.
Yeah, so we didn't have any, we had said originally we would have our title report this month, which we obviously just did, and then new course requests. I've heard a little bit about a couple of course requests, one potential at the middle school, one actually a couple at the high school in one curricular area. There's still more work to be done there. They need to kind of do more work getting everything
Yeah.
outlined. They need principal approval yet. And so the curriculum chairs know that work needs to continue to happen before it comes here.
Okay.
So we possibly will have some in November, but did not have any ready to go tonight. In November, we're scheduled to have, as part of an annual process, an update on Fall Summer Academy, and we'll talk about the dates for the upcoming year. And then again, those new course requests, if those come through, we'll have the world language standards review and potential adoption at that next meeting, and then I'm hoping to bring an update on where we are with social studies and ELA. Both are curriculum review areas for us this year. ELA standards, I think we will also, I'm planning to wrap into that presentation an overview of Act 20, that's the early literacy law.
Mhm.
So we'll wrap that into that work, and I think that's it for November, so it will be a happy meeting. So, and we currently had not planned on a December meeting. I think our November meeting is the 29th. So just with holiday schedules and finishing in December, the turnaround for a December meeting, it might be worth just powering through one November meeting.
Yeah.
So we'll do about snacks or something.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm dragging right now.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to leave work early today and I didn't. But,
So-
okay.
So that's where we are, and then I did make a note here just about an intervention presentation, and so
Okay.
I'll work with our intervention team and see when a good time
Yeah.
for that would be. Obviously not November, but we'll
No.
definitely consider that, and then just the world language piece, made a note about that too, that's probably more of a, long
Yeah,
term strategic plan,
absolutely.
but yeah,
Mhm.
that would be great for us to look at, so. That's what I know.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for preparing.
Yeah.
Anything to add or? We'll chat.
Say, yeah, we're always,
We're always email.
you know where to
or
find me.
anything, yeah, if anything ever pops
Something
up and
comes
you,
up for sure,
think of something, yeah. It never hurts to just shoot out an email.
for sure. We can't do it right, we'll plan it for
Yeah.
but it works, but yeah, once we get into second semester, we definitely have a full calendar, especially as we get to spring and some of the things that we were trying to, implement this year and bring back for review later in the year, so. Buckle up, it'll be fun.
When is the next meeting date? You said it.
I believe it is the 29th of
Okay.
November. I will look really quick to confirm that I got that correct.
Yeah, I do have the 29th at 6.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, throw me on the invite again.
Yeah.
You
So
may
once
already
you
be on
join
it.
the party, we'll never kick you off. All right, so then we're ready to adjourn. I'm like, wow.
I'll motion.
I'm dumbfounded.
I'll
Okay.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, meeting is adjourned. All right, well, that was cool.